But then that's another sort of that, let's not be curious.
Yeah.
Let's not look at this plant that we're growing because we may kill it.
Yeah.
And then what are we going to do
Let's
then?
just be like children who are
And
curious.
children are irreverently curious. A child will go up to
Yes.
someone and say something so rude.
Yes.
Because they're just really, really curious.
And it's so beautiful.
And it's great. And then, you know what? They learn something.
Oh, yeah.
They always learn. How many times are we so afraid to dig into something because it's either going to be against a social code or the answer might suck?
Yes.
Yeah.
That fear to explore, and I mean, this is naturally how we survive as children. That curiosity. This is how we learn language. This is how we pay attention. We absorb.
Yeah.
And we explore. We want to discover. And
We follow the interest.
Yeah, and we squash this. Well, as adults, we squash this in children before we realize it. Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about this with his kids about the tooth fairy.
Oh.
And he said, when the kids were talking about, like, oh, they're hearing about this tooth fairy at the school or whatever, or he told me, he's like, we heard this thing about this tooth fairy. Apparently, if you put your tooth under the pillow, you get money or whatever. He's like, we don't know, but that's what we heard. And then, and then he just observed how his kids processed all this over time.
Yeah.
So what the kids did was they put their tooth under the pillow, and Neil deGrasse Tyson and his wife, they put the money under the pillow. And the kid's like, look, the tooth fairy is real. I got the dollar or whatever. And then he said, are you sure? Are you sure it was the tooth fairy? And so he instilled this skepticism.
Little doubt.
And then the kids were like, no. He's like, did you see the tooth fairy? Do you know that the tooth fairy actually put it under your pillow? Do you know it wasn't somebody else? They're like, no, I didn't see them. I'm like, okay. So they start doing their experiments. They start doing things like, I think they put like stuff that would make noise around their bed so that they can hear the walking of the tooth fairy come in. But apparently this didn't work. I guess Neil deGrasse, they walked around.
Yeah.
They tiptoed.
Oh.
And then the kids at school started saying, you know what? We think it might be our parents that's doing this, but we don't know for sure. They're like, okay, here's what we do. The next person who loses their tooth, don't tell your parents. Just put it under your pillow. And then, of course, they did this, and they saw that it wasn't real.
Wow.
And then Neil deGrasse Tyson is like, this is what adults should be doing.
The way he is.
Yeah, I know.
That is so good.
It's so true, though. And that curiosity, though, that what amazing things would accomplish if we could continue looking at the world in such an exploratory fashion.
Yeah.
In such a
Always curious.
always curious, always learning, always wanting to understand. Not just this is the way it is. Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean much to me, but okay. If you spill something on the floor, you can teach them about physics. Do you know why it exploded this way and not that way? Sure. You want them to be careful, responsible. You still want to teach them. You still may have to discipline them in
You
certain
don't want
ways.
mess.
But you can add to it.
Yeah.
You're like, you know what? This doesn't just have to be don't do and do.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's not like there's two. It's not binary. The whole
Exactly.
binary thing is so. There's almost no binaries in real life at all, right? Because it's like they can screw up something that's actually bad, but it doesn't have. That doesn't mean that the bad thing needs to happen to them, and they can grow. It's like
And can you imagine if we continued to think this way when we got older and it came to something like sexuality,
yeah.
or it came to something like religion,
Yeah.
or career choices, or
When a
whatever.
problem arises, instead of being like we have to squish it and put it away, be curious about the problem. Be curious about this strange and new and maybe even destructive thing
Sure.
that's coming.
And care about being reasonably certain. Care about not being mistaken.
Yeah.
Make sure you do your best to sort of consider what all the alternatives are,
Yeah.
so that you can be sure about the one that you think you're sure about.
Yeah.
There's really nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with strengthening an idea by criticizing
By
it.
doubting it.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a beautiful thing, and this builds confidence.
Yeah.
This is why I feel so much more confident about the things I believe or don't believe, or just saying I don't know, because now it's not just following a verse and believing that verse is true because believing the Bible is true, and believing the Bible is true. Why? Because there's certain events
Bible says it's true.
that I assert happened, even though I can't verify whether or not it was actually something supernatural or it was just us or whatever. Like, I am amazed when I can understand something like evolution.
Yep.
And I can be taught that I was wrong about the definition of adaptation.
Yes.
After Bible colleges, after so many conferences and sermons, and after handing out tracts myself about evolution, or anti-evolution tracts, that I could be told the way it actually is, and be amazed and be glad.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't have to be wrong anymore because this makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I don't have to marry myself to even this definition.
You don't even have to marry that.
No.
Yeah.
And this makes so much more sense, that you need to leave yourself open to be corrected in order to feel correct.
Or else you won't grow even. If there's no room, then you're stuck.
Absolutely.
You're in one place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So learning evolution was great. I did that. I had an environmental sciences class at Sheridan.
Nice.
This is kind of what helped me move away from just sort of this in-between to actual atheism. This is my half an hour answer to your question, basically. So I took environmental sciences because I was starting to care more about, my diet and the environment. As I became more just myself pursuing things I wanted to pursue, I started to see trees differently. It's not just, oh, this is God's signature, look out, whatever. It's like, no, I really care that we're polluting our planet so much, or I really care that people I live with know how to recycle and they really don't. I really care about these things, so I'm like, I took that course. It was so amazing.
Yeah.
So many interesting things. He went through so many slides so quickly because there's so much information that everyone would benefit from knowing, and he didn't want to rush through it or whatever. But it's just so much useful information. And at one point, he had to explain adaptation in order to explain something else that he was talking about. So he gives this definition, and I'm just kind of like, I'm down at my thing taking notes, and then he said, this is the wrong definition. And I'm like, what? He's like, this is a common misconception about the way adaptation works, and this was the way I'd always thought about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way. I'm like, what is he about to say next? Because you're about to blow my mind. And he explained it, and it was it was the simplest thing ever. The way I remember being taught about adaptation, it's always this straw man sort of explanation that you need a certain trait in order to survive as a species, so you develop that trait in order to survive.
In order to survive, kind of on purpose.
Exactly.
Is what is implied. It's like
exactly
the giraffe looks at the tree.
That's the same example.
And it's always the giraffe
Yeah.
example, right?
He needs
and the giraffe yearns to get up there, and his yearning somehow makes it so his kids have longer necks.
Yeah.
Which is just not. That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
So of course all Christians are like, evolution is a load of crap. That
Of
doesn't
course.
make any damn sense.
Because that actual description is a load of crap.
That's not evolution.
It is nonsense.
Yeah.
And then when he explained, he's like, no. Okay, you have genes that mutate. This is random. This is the same thing as what causes hair
Cancer.
color to change.
Yeah.
Cancer.
Yeah.
It causes all sorts of things. This is what gives all your kids slightly different traits, right? Some of them might not even come from you. They may come from people before you.
Yeah.
They may come from your ancestors, whatever. Suddenly your kid has red hair or whatever. And these are mutations. These are your genes coming together and they're just creating their own sort of mix. This is random. But natural selection is not random.
Not random.
Adaptation is basically the result of natural selection. And what natural selection is when you say like there's a tribe of animal that struggles to elude this predator because they just can't run fast enough. They can have within their tribe maybe one or two or a small handful of animals born with slightly different mutations, where some of them, just like people, might be a little more muscular or might be a little faster runner, or they might camouflage a little better because their fur is a little different. All that sort of thing. Just very subtle traits, very subtle differences.
Tiny differences.
Tiny differences, most of which normally don't make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is stuff like that in two isolated groups, basically, to the point where they are able to survive and they fit their environment best.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when they accomplish this, they are said to have adapted to their environment. Not because they chose to
Yeah.
or whatever. It's because their mutations
Happen to work.
happen to be fortunate for what they need to be able to do in order to survive. And then you have two tribes that may be separated by geographical distance or for whatever reason. They got split up and they're doing their own sort of mutations. If they do this to the point where they can no longer reproduce together, then you have two different species. And this is speciation. And then you do that enough over a long period of time.
Literally mind-boggling.
Yes.
You can't even conceive of this amount of
Can't
time.
conceive. And understanding that most species that have ever existed have died off. Then it makes amazing sense where diversity of species come from.
Yeah.
And then it starts to so I went online to confirm this because I was like, this is blowing my mind. Because this is really cool.
Yeah.
And this is when I stumbled on the atheist and theist world of debates on YouTube, and I could not believe that these things even happened.
Mm-hmm.
Did not know these things were ever occurring. I couldn't believe churches were inviting atheists to have debates about whether or not God exists. Like, when would a Brethren church ever do that? Never. So I was like, this is amazing. I became completely addicted to that. Still am. It's been like 2 years. I cannot get enough of them.
Wow.
And in that, I was finally hearing. I feel like I was listening to the whole world finally. Instead, I wasn't listening to just my local church.
The world through the filter of the church.
Yes, and that's why I think it's often said that the internet is where religion comes to die, because this is where you can listen to all opinions,
Wow.
whether they are fallacious or not,
Yeah.
and you can fact check.
Yeah.
And everything is slowly being recorded and documented, and slowly being better verified. And you can also track when people are dishonest and all that kind of stuff, right? So now, like when I was a kid, the internet didn't exist for for any of us. So what you were hearing was just from your family, or from your local church, or
maybe a little bit from school.
Maybe a little bit from school, and this was whatever your small world was. This is all you were going to know, and now you can listen to everybody. So now you hear all the arguments. And I've been hearing arguments that I've never heard before.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that's a good point. Or I never thought of that. Or wow, I never. And now because I had stepped back from everything, I had no lens.
Yeah.
I wasn't biased one way or the other. I was literally just like, I don't know who the hell I am. So just
everyone talk to me, please.
Everyone talk, and whoever makes sense gets in. You know?
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, I'm going to listen to all these debates, and I just loved it. There were some of the theists also would give arguments that I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
And I was surprised how some of them could still hold their position amidst the things I heard, because the things I heard from the atheists, like, this ruins the entire religion. But then they would say something like, oh yeah, a Christian can still see it that way, and then it doesn't ruin it for them. And this has been my ongoing dilemma of how do you actually talk to Christians who still think this way, because you can still find some biblical way to look at something and find a way to justify it. And this is why religion continues to exist. It doesn't really matter how good your argument is. You can put the evidence right in their face, and you can still have somebody be like Ken Ham and be like, nothing will change my mind. Nothing.
Yeah.
The street epistemology I don't know if you found these videos on YouTube.
I did.
These are great. I love these conversations because these are just basically as neutral, non-judgmental, and exploratory as you can get with somebody who has strong beliefs. This is probably the most disarming method that I've come across so far.
It's just questions, I think.
It's
right?
just
questions.
Socratic questions that want to understand how you came to know the thing that you believe is true. What's the method that you used?
Yeah.
And it's something that we really don't do as Christians. I mean, how is it that the average Christian becomes a Christian? They're raised that way. They later make the decision, or they're feeling like something's missing in life, and then they find it in the church.
Yeah.
At what point do we actually say, wait, am I using a correct method to arrive at something that is true? Am I using reliable methods? If I'm using faith, can anybody use faith to conclude that anything is true? And if that's the case, what am I doing to make sure that I'm not the one who's deceived?
Yeah.
I don't
Checking
think
your tools.
checking your tools. They compare it sometimes to like checking your math work.
Oh.
You can, because you remember how you used to be able to solve math problems without actually doing the work,
Yeah.
because you just like, oh, I know it's this.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the teacher's like, no, you need to
Show
show
your
your
work.
work.
I hated that.
You need to
True.
demonstrate that you understand the way this is solved.
And I would always be like, I don't.
Yeah.
But I managed to solve it.
Yes,
Just
but
let me go.
I know it's true. I know it's right. I know it's like, no. But that has no weight
Yeah.
unless you can demonstrate
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
and how. So if you understand the way to solve that problem, you're going to be able to be consistent with the way you solve other similar problems.
Yes.
Because you're going to know to apply the same logic. And you're not going to, which always happens, you're going to eventually encounter a problem that isn't painted so nicely, and
you'll
you're not
need
going to know how to solve it.
Yeah, you're going to need to be able to do that work that you really didn't want to show.
Exactly. And this is what we need to do better with stuff like religion.
Yeah.
We need to, if you believe one religion or whatever is the true religion, you need to really be able to show your work in a way that makes sense to everybody else as well.
Yeah.
In
And to
order,
even- yeah.
in order for you to know that you can take this same thinking and you can go to Islam, you can go to Mormonism, you can go to secularism, whatever it is, and you can know that your method is reliable, reasonably reliable.
Yeah.
So I've been really getting into those, the debates, the epistemology. It's fascinating to me, and very slowly. I still have my notes for over the last like 10 years,
Nice.
and I still have notes of where I was still hanging on to the God belief. This was the last thing that I let go of, and when I'm finding with other people who go through it, it tends to be the last thing.
Yeah.
They
Interesting.
usually go from, if they're devout, they go from something's wrong with the system,
Yeah, that's what
and they sometimes become spiritual instead of religious.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they sort of slip
There's
into...
no room for me there.
No, they slip into, after that, usually some sort of humanitarian thing where it's like, okay, I'm getting away from just supernatural. I'm like, okay, what's real is just, I know people are hurting, and I just love people, I want to help people, whatever. And if they keep going, it usually ends up being, I don't know if any of this is true.
Yeah.
And the last thing to go is God, because God is the furthest thing from explanation.
And I see that in the conversations I follow online. There's groups called like the Life After Evangelical, one that I can't remember. And a lot of these people who have completely deconstructed from evangelicalism, they'll say, I still can't not believe in God, and I'm trying to reconstruct what that means for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a long period of time before I admitted to myself that that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
I didn't want to admit it was true,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I must have, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it might have been 1 or 2 months of me feeling like I had just arrived there, but I really didn't want to acknowledge it. I was afraid of that word atheist. I did not want to use it, and I certainly didn't want to publicize it.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
So I obviously continued to,
You've
but it was
changed.
very slow. It was very slow for me, and it was basically as I deconstructed more of the doctrine, through the debates, through my own research, through just like thinking the hell out of everything, conversations with people, living my own life, pursuing my own things, making my own mistakes, owning all these things, very slowly just started to, everything else just started to crumble. To the point where I cannot be convinced that a God exists. And even if the God, any of these gods really existed, I don't see them as worthy of
What
worship.
about that one? The blue one.
I like the color
There's
blue.
lots to choose from.
It's color blue.
I look at that and I just, what are we doing with reality? What are we doing? What is this?
We are creating grand dramas and hoping not to get too taken in by them. But it is fun to get taken in a little, right? Now here's the thing, if all of this is an illusion,
Right.
we still want to play with it, and we ought to, right? The trick is, I think the danger is when we let it become, when it's no longer a drama, when it's no longer a great story that helps us be awesome actors upon the stage, when it kills the story. So I look at these all as really I still resonate with the language, with the mythology. I don't think any of it happened.
What is it for you, what is it for you that you feel still connects you with the language or with the mythology or with the positive impact that you
Part of
remember?
it, I mean, part of it may be something as simple as the style, right? Which of course doesn't resonate with most people. I mean, evangelicalism has a very weird style.
When you say style, what do you mean?
I mean the kind of language that's used, the
hymns? Or the discipline, you mean, the spiritual or the routine.
I enjoy ritual. What still resonates? Why? It's almost the way Pakistan resonates, because Pakistan is a country that is not comfortable.
Right.
It is not. It's not a necessarily good place to raise your kids. In some ways, right? There's a lot of problems in Pakistan, especially where we live in very poor, underdeveloped, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But there was something about it, the starkness, that was just resonated.
Really?
And I feel a similar way, you know, sometimes I'm tempted to call myself religious but not spiritual. which wouldn't be accurate either. But there is just something about it, and I can't really tell what. It's almost like being on a restrictive diet for its own sake.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning that before.
Yeah.
Something about needing to decide for something and decide against something that really resonates with you.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of it. And that's part of the story. And part of the reason I'm doing the Year of Living Christian is to find out what exactly that is. And I haven't made it very far in that line of inquiry yet. It's been a weird year, hasn't it? But there's something about the style, the mythology itself, the stories. There's something in there
Maybe
still.
you miss it because you lived it for such a long time.
Yeah, I could believe
I
that
think
too.
I had an element of that too. You know, a lot of Christians or ex-Christians that I see online, or any religion, say that they miss the community.
Yeah.
They miss feeling like they had a paradise to go to.
That was nice.
They miss all kinds of certain things. There might be they might have felt certain about certain areas of life.
Yeah.
That now
There was
we
a
have to realize
confidence.
we don't know, and we have to figure this out.
Yeah.
That might
Yeah,
not be as
absolutely.
exciting.
That's-
It might be real, and it might be true that way, that
Yeah.
we don't know. But yeah, some people feel like they miss that. And I feel like I missed some of that as well. I missed feeling like I always had a place to go to.
Yeah.
This certainly does not in any way make me want to go back to it. But this is just what a religious community does. Is you create this world that you become very dependent on.
Yeah.
And it is a shock to leave it. It is such a shock.
Cold place to be.
And you very often feel like something of you is gutted when you leave it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was the Holy Spirit that gets gutted. I don't think it was a God that gets gutted. I'm not convinced any of those things exist. But I think it was an investment, a very personal, genuine investment that gets gutted.
Yeah.
It's like you had this relationship that was so meaningful, you put your whole life into it, and all of a sudden
It's gone.
it's gone.
It's as if, and this is another funny, cool thing that Derek said. You can't let God have everything in the divorce.
Wow. Very
I was
interesting.
like, that's a cool way to put it.
Very interesting.
Because there are some things that, and I still haven't identified what those things are for me, that I want to keep after the divorce.
Yeah, I would say, like, not drinking alcohol is something I want to. Even though Jesus drank alcohol, so I guess I'm.
I mean, he had a winery of some kind, it seems.
Apparently. Apart from that, I wouldn't even say that a God gets to keep anything, because I don't think anything good that I would have gotten out of it is exclusive to Christianity.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Realizing Christianity does not have a corner. No religion has a corner on the market of good things in our lives.
Yes.
Even if we were first introduced to them through Christianity.
Sure.
There's other routes. So
which is the case.
So when you have a thing that you feel like came from Christianity, and now the Christianity is gone, don't give that thing back. Right?